How's it going, everybody? This is the Uncanny Omar from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And today I have a very special episode. I'm going to be talking about one of Kentucky's national treasures, Ernest. But I'm not alone today. I have a couple of people with me, including a friend of mine, Justin Lloyd. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
We'll talk about why he's here sitting next to me, what he has to do with all this. And then Corey Perkins, all the way from Tennessee. Which
Murfreesboro,
also
Tennessee.
A big Ernest state.
True. Ernest was born in Nashville. Varney born in Lexington. Ernest born in Nashville. We got the connection.
That's so weird to say. That's so weird. But thank you both for joining me today to talk about this wonderful project that coincidentally was so weird. I remember somebody had messaged me about it before Justin did, and Justin said, "Hey, there's going to be an Ernest graphic novel." And I'm like, yeah, you're too late, dude. You should have been the one that told me. But one of my viewers told me that this is happening. So this is really cool. This is the writer, Corey Perkins. And Justin, tell us who you are and why this is so important to you.
I am Jim Varney's nephew. One of his older sisters was my mother. About 10 years ago, I wrote a book called The Importance of Being Ernest, The Life of Actor Jim Varney. It was about 8 years after he had passed, and I thought somebody needs to write a book about Jim, and maybe I'm the guy to do it. And it took me about 6 years, and it came out about 10 years ago, and I've just and it was at least something for the Ernest fans to sink their teeth into, because basically I think when Jim passed, Ernest passed, and so I'm so happy for the Ernest fans to now have something. An adventure for Ernest in some capacity to enjoy, and I think this graphic novel seems like it's going to be just awesome. So I'm very excited, and I'm trying to do everything I can to help Corey promote it and get the word out. So
okay,
yeah.
So you were related to Ernest, like a living legend.
My mom's younger brother. Yeah.
It's crazy that because he's been gone. What, 2000?
Yeah,
when he passed away?
Almost 25 years. Yeah, a long time.
That is insane to think about, because he was such a big icon here. And Corey, what about you? Did you grow up watching like the Ernest commercials, Ernest Goes to Camp, and all the movies, the TV show? How did you become like a fan? Were you a fan of Ernest, or did you just like decide to make a comic book about Ernest?
Well, first of all, thanks for having us on the show, Omar. I'm thrilled to be here, and we've been waiting for this interview for a while. And look at that! Look at how handsome Justin looks in that shirt, that Star Wars shirt. Good looking guy over there. Yeah, I became an Ernest fan at like the age of 5. My first friend in preschool, his name was Eric Jones, and he introduced me to Ernest Goes to Camp, and he told me about this movie with flying turtle shell paratroopers. So then it became just like a love affair. Fast forward to when we were 18 years old. Funny little story. We were at a party with 18-year-olds with parents gone. They were doing all the things that kids could do. What did me and Eric do? We rent the VHS of Ernest Scared Stupid while all the other kids are trying to be cool. We're sitting there laughing our butts off. So yeah, I've grown up loving all the Ernest movies.
What's your favorite Ernest movie?
Scared Stupid. I mean,
Scared Stupid. That's
awesome. I love it. Yeah. It's not one of my favorite Ernest movies. It's one of my favorite movies ever, period. Like, I love it.
Whoa, really? You really liked it? Is that the third one?
The fourth one.
The fourth. Yeah. Oh, Goes to Jail. I forgot about Goes to Jail. Right. Yeah. So how did this even come about? Justin had written a book, and you've been working on a documentary for a long time, haven't you?
Yeah, some people came to me a while back that wanted to create a documentary based on my book. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's been, with COVID thrown in there too, it's been about 5 years. So and then I only found out about this just maybe a few months ago. I had no idea that this was even, that Corey's project was even in the works. So
this is, I guess, a question for Corey and you. How does that even work? Because I know that Jim Varney was a real human being, right? He's now gone, but Ernest was the character that he played. And I don't know, like, legalities and how all that works. Like, do you have to get permission from the family, or do you have to get just permission from the people that own the IP Ernest? Because Jim Varney is different than Ernest, right? I know this is weird and technical, but how does that even work, Corey?
great question.
I'll let Justin start off and then back off.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I know that John Cherry was the creator of one of the creators of Ernest, the owner of the IP,
Okay.
and the owner of the ad agency Card and Cherry, and and he was director of pretty much all the films, all the commercials, the TV show that was popular was one year in the late '80s, Hey Burn It's Ernest. So he passed away. What's it been? A couple of years, Corey, I think.
Yeah. I think 3-4 years ago, something like that.
So his son Josh Cherry now owns the IP.
Okay.
And that's who Corey is working with to get the rights to use the character for the comic.
Okay.
Yes. So me and the IP owner, Josh Cherry, we just sat down and we're like, man, like it would be awesome to bring Ernest back in some way. And we were thinking like, it'd be awesome to have a graphic novel. And so we just sat down and started talking about it. And then the idea of Ernest and the Dream Stone kind of came to me in a flash of intermission, as Ernest would say. And so then we just started talking, and then and as the idea started happening, like at some point, we just brought it forward and we started going from there. And then me and Justin met at Ernest Day. Now, funny story is that Justin was texted about the beginning of this at the same time Josh Cherry was. So there's another writer that I'll leave his name out. He sent an email to text a few people, but Justin at some point, I guess he missed it. So we actually would have been talking way longer, but then we ended up meeting at Ernest Day, and that's where we became buddies.
To be fair, this person brought up a lots of ideas and I didn't know like which ones were really that valid and so forth. And even the name that he gave me was some name that you used?
I used to have it.
Yeah, explain.
I used to have an alias on Facebook so people couldn't find me, and it was Landon Musashi, because Landon's my middle name, and Musashi is the name of my favorite samurai in Japanese history. And I thought, well, that way my work colleagues will never find me. And eventually I was like, well, I just need to start telling people no. So I switched back to Corey Perkins eventually.
Yeah. So
okay, so let's go back to what you were saying, Corey. You were a fan. You got together with I'm sorry, what was the gentleman's name? Josh is the son?
Josh Cherry, yeah.
Okay. You got together with Josh. How did that even happen? Like, were you just friends with Josh Cherry, or had you been stalking Josh because you are such a fan of Ernest that you're like, I'm gonna find my way in there somehow? How did that come about?
Little from column A, little from column B. No, a funny story on that is I teach at a university here in Middle Tennessee, and I actually brought his dad in. So John Cherry, the original creator and director of the Ernest movies and character, I brought him in one of my classes I guess in 2016, years before he passed away. And I teach the class is called Globalization Through Film. Now that class is supposed to be about topics in globalization, like political, international political, economic, and stuff like that. And I told my classes, we're going to talk about the globalization of Ernest today. And the students were like, what the crap are we talking? And so suddenly I'm showing an Ernest film and I bring in John Cherry. It was really more for me. But so I got to
use your creds. I like that.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Burn 101
for selfish reasons. Absolutely. I'm the same way, man. Like I
loved it, man. And actually a little side story that I haven't told Josh the story. I've been meaning to tell him, and every time I talk to him, I forget. So maybe if you hear this, Josh, here's a story for you. I asked John, hey man, would you mind if I started working on some Ernest fan fiction? And I thought he might say no. I mean, what are you going to tell a fan? He's like, yeah, do it. He actually encouraged me. So I remember after that day, I started writing my own little Ernest stories in this room over here, just like, nerding out and having a blast. So that was actually the genesis of it. I did write another graphic novel. I got it signed to a publisher. I'll leave that out because I didn't quite enjoy working with them. So no problem. So I decided not to go further with that. But I got my experience, got my confidence up. And then I had this idea for doing a graphic novel, and Ernest had never been in a graphic novel, which is crazy because he's such a cartoon-like character. Jim Varney's in the movies, his expression's already so cartoon-like. You're like, wow, how did this not become a cartoon in the past? And I know Justin can speak to that. And so I just kind of pitched this idea, and without naming names, it went to one person, and then it went to another person. And the next thing you know, I'm just hanging out with Josh and we're just eating burgers and talking about ideas. And so that's kind of how those connections got made.
So from becoming a fan of Ernest at a young age to fanficking Ernest
Yeah.
to actually working on a graphic novel. There hasn't been an Ernest product out there in so long. There's a gentleman that does a lot of conventions. Like he goes by the Son of Ernest, and I think he's done local commercials here in Kentucky.
I had lunch with him today, actually.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Billy Crank.
Billy, funny guy, comedian,
great
right?
Guy. Great guy.
But outside of that, like the actual Ernest, like it's weird to think about, right? And I don't know, although Brian is here, Brian is from overseas. I love the Ernest films. Like, I don't know how big Ernest was overseas. I don't know how big he made it. But here, at least in America, he was one of the biggest in Kentucky, he was huge.
Of course, yeah.
Whenever he would go back home, like people made a big deal of it. Like whenever he would go back, especially after, what was it? The Beverly Hills movie. You remember?
Beverly Hillbillies, yeah.
Yeah, they did the Beverly Hills Billies movies, and one of them, and he was in it. And I remember him going back to like the racetrack and stuff, and they made like a whole day out of it.
What was funny about the commercials is the way they shot them. Everybody thought that character was local to their hometown. So people in Oklahoma think he's from there. People from Texas think he's from there. And so, yeah. And then, so that's really quite a phenomenon. So I
always like to add as well that like a lot of times people look back on Ernest and they think of this kid's character because of the movies. But if you go back to the height of Ernest Mania, and Justin can say more about this than I can, you'll see pictures of him at parades and public events where adults are running at him, trying to get his autograph, kiss Jim Varney on the cheek as he's dressed up as Ernest. Like this was like a mania that took over. And like, so Ernest's height of popularity was, if you don't know, it lasted for over a decade. I mean, hardcore, you know, and so it wasn't like a one-off film. Like he was a part of pop culture for a long time.
Oh yeah, he had those Saturday morning not cartoons. I'm sorry, the Saturday morning show. Hey Vern, it's Ernest. It's my brother and I love that show. I wish we had met when you were younger and I was younger, Justin. So I would have hung out with you, and I'll be like, hey man, can you tell your uncle I love him? But you know, it's crazy to think about that he's left such an impact. Like my kids have watched those movies. Which is funny because your daughter had it. And I was like, your uncle, your great uncle is Ernest?
It's so unimpressed.
She was like,
yeah, this Jim Varney guy.
What, man? And to me, like, Ernest Goes to Camp is one of my all-time favorite movies. It's up there. It's got to be in the top 50 for me. I love that movie. But there hasn't been an Ernest product. There hasn't been an Ernest show. There hasn't been an Ernest comic book or a cartoon, which you figure by now there might have been, considering that IP still owned for the character.
Sure.
Like, so this is a big deal that this is now coming out. This is the first, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the very first Ernest thing we've had since he passed away, right?
Yeah, like since 97, I think it was, or 98.
I think it's 26 years at this point. Yeah. I think Ernest Goes to the Army was the last Ernest film that they did. And that might have been what, 98?
Maybe,
something
yeah,
like
97,
that?
98 sounds right. Yeah.
So Logan is saying we used to get, and I would watch Ernest movies here in England. I think elder millennials will know who he is.
Yes. Yes.
Jim traveled to England, loved going to England and tracing, the Varney heritage back to England. So he'd have loved to hear that. Yeah.
It's that time of year to watch Ernest Scared Stupid Again, which also happens to be Corey's favorite movies. And James, thank you so much for Ever My Oracle. Our Ernest in the Army, February 24th, 1998.
There you go.
James on the spot, baby.
Was that straight to Disney?
After like the fifth movie, everything went straight to video, I believe. Is that right? Does that sound right, Corey?
Correct. The first 4 were Disney. Then the last 5 were indie, but the first of the indie films had a theatrical release, which was Ernest Rides Again.
Yeah. It was, I think, released right around when the Beverly Hillbillies movie was released. So I think they're almost back to back. So that was interesting.
So okay, you came up with the idea. You started talking to Josh Cherry, who now owned the IP Ernest. At what point did the idea go from, man, it sounds really fun, let's do a graphic novel, to, no, let's really do a graphic novel? Can you give me like a timeline of when the idea became like, no, let's do this. Let's find an artist. Let's find an inker. Let's find a letter and let's publish it.
Yeah, that's a good question and a big question. So there was actually other ideas, which I'm not at liberty to publicly say, of stuff that we thought we might want to do that we still could do in the future. So then we were like, well, what if we did Ernest and the Dream Stone? And once that idea was incepted in my head, as much as big of a nerd as I am for Ernest, that's all it took. And so I was drilling away on the computer. And actually, for people out there, it's a screenplay. And I'd say I'm a better screenwriter than I am a graphic novel writer. You know, I'm more trained in screenwriting. And so we wrote a freaking movie. This was a movie, and then we converted that to a graphic novel script. So it's a very cinematic piece, which is why it's over 150 pages, because we're taking the full screenplay and turning it into a graphic novel. So when you get this thing in your hands, this is going to be like holding a movie in your hands. And that's something I'm really excited about. So then to answer your question, so the process first happened when we wrote the graphic novel. The screenplay, the script, it probably took 1.5 years to finalize everything, you know, because I locked myself in a closet one summer and I wrote the first draft of the script. But if you're going to write any script that's worth its salt, you know, you're not going to end there. That's just the beginning. So then you go back and you start editing things, you start cutting things, you start adding things. I got all kinds of friends to read initial versions of the draft. You know, we have story pros that have looked over it. And so we got a lot of people that looked over it. And then there's the process of talking to Josh Cherry about it. And then, you know, how long hey, here's a 105-page piece of paper. Read that. So it's going to take somebody a while to get back to you. So then that took a while. Right. Eventually, he called me up and he's like, man, this is great. And so I was like, great. That is great. And so then we were like, let's do it. So then we went full steam ahead. And so then I'd say I started searching for artists. It feels like I started in like January, February of this year, maybe like a year ago. I don't know. I'm like in a time vacuum. I can't even remember. Not too long ago, but a while ago. How about that? And I scoured the earth for artists across the world. We were looking for, you know, somebody who I thought could do the job. And we were also looking for somebody who can make Ernest look more realistic. And that was a challenge. And the reason why is because this story is a spooky story, right? This story is like my love letter to Ernest Scared Stupid. And I thought, you know what? I want more of that sketchy penciling look as opposed to something more cartoony, because we could have pushed into the cartoony. So then we had to find an artist that could pull that off. So I'll stop blabbing and you can ask me or Justin more stuff.
Well, I think that is a very hard thing to find. Because you're dealing with somebody that was a real person, right? So for an artist to capture that image into a sequential art, I think a lot of people can do covers, right? There's a lot of artists that can do covers, but to tell a sequential story in the form of graphic novels and comics, that takes a special skill. And to put in there the image of the person, that makes it really difficult, because then you have to also think that this was somebody else, and there's not, you know, I guess you could still frame some shots. I mean, we do live in the age of the internet, but I mean, what's the fun in that when you can have a little more cartoony and a little more fun with the art? So who is the artist that you ended up going with?
So I got a big point on that. So the artist is his name's Arif Rusanto. He's from Indonesia. I love working with this guy. Right when I found him, I was testing out a handful of artists. By the way, if you guys don't know, Ernest used to knock on Vern's door and just pester the crap out of Vern. Hey, Vern. And Vern is the cameraman, and he doesn't want anything to do with Ernest. That's what I did to the comic industry. I started emailing all these people asking about what styles and rates, and they're probably like, who's this Ernest guy? So anyway, Arif was awesome because he would send in the first draft of what he would do, and it was great, but maybe it wasn't all the way there, right? But the thing that separated Arif from other artists who would just send in one thing, Arif then sent in another, and it got a little better. He sent in another. And suddenly, like, this guy was showing how much passion he had for Ernest, because when I asked him about this, you know, he was like, oh yeah, of course I remember Ernest. And so he really wanted this. And so that's something that, you know, made me believe in him, because I wanted to have other people on my team that really love Ernest too. And so that's one of the great. So then Arif's product just became this amazing thing that it is. Now, also, one of the reasons why it feels authentic, and this is something that I took a lot of care into doing, is because I'm such an Ernest fan. I was like, if we do this, this is not a fly by night thing. Either it's going to feel authentic. Sure, you can love or hate the story, but it's got to feel authentic. So I developed this massive compendium of, and I mean like over 1,000 files, by the way, like you said, of stills from movie, happy, sad, nervous, nervous and sad, nervous and happy. And I mean, it took me weeks, but that's how much I cared. And so when I did the comic script, I posted these in. I mean, it took me forever to do that, but I really wanted this comic to feel like if you pick it up, you feel like you're in the Ernest world. So my artist also has all those references in there too. So we kind of work together on that.
Please tell me one of those ideas is an Ernest cartoon. That's what's been missing. I mean, the UK we got the Ernest films on VHS and eventually DVD, but never got the TV show or commercials. So the TV show lasted
just a year,
one season, right?
Yeah, I think like 13 episodes, and it won. You know, they won an Emmy. He got an Emmy for that. Just
how did they not do another sequel or a season?
I don't know. It was on CBS. It ran, I think, right before Pee-wee's Playhouse too. I think.
Yeah, Pee-wee's Playhouse was huge.
Yeah.
That went on for some years too. Yeah.
But yeah.
I didn't realize it came on before Pee-wee. That's a heck of a morning to watch.
Yeah,
dude.
Jim Varney's Ernest and then Paul Rubin as Pee-wee.
Yeah.
Saturday mornings were crazy back in the 80s. Like this was 89,
88, 89. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember watching it with my brother because we were big fans of like Ernest Goes to Camp, and it was, I want to say it was right after Safe's Christmas that they started showing those.
Yeah.
I thought it was right before, but yeah, either way, right then. Yeah, right after Ernest Goes to Camp, I can imagine that happening. So that makes perfect sense.
So, hey, Vern, it's Ernest, September 17th, look at that, man, to December 24th, 1988.
Yeah.
That is crazy. As a kid, Ernest was, dude, I loved like his facial expressions, his voices, like he was just so ridiculous and over the top. I loved him. I think as kids, we all, that grew up with him. Has the documentary been made and released yet? If so, what's it called?
It's called the Importance of Being Ernest, same title as my book, and we've just now started post-production. We've got a few more interviews left. One of them is going to be quite a cool interview that's going to be taking place in a few weeks. Very excited about it. So we've got some great interviewees, some great stuff. So excited because I'm a movie guy. I mean, my thing all along was wanting to do a documentary, but I just didn't know how to go about that. I thought, well, at the time, a book seemed something much more possible for me. At least.
Figured a book would be so much more difficult.
Well, like, I mean, I guess for rights and stuff, and getting footage and all this, I'm like, I can just write. I can do the research and interviews and just write it out and stuff. And so, it still took me 6 years. But then, and I had been approached through the years about doing a documentary from different people, and then there was a couple people that did a podcast, a really good podcast. Ernest Goes to Podcast, it was called. And one of the people on there, David Pagano, I got to know him through that. And he said, hey, I've done some documentaries before. And with this podcast I've done so much Jim Varney Ernest research from our podcast that I think that would be a great subject for my next documentary. And that's when I thought, yeah, that's, we'd like to, base it on your book, adapt it from your book. And so, yeah, that's when we started that. And that was right before COVID. So we basically kind of got delayed a couple of years with COVID. We couldn't really do any interviews, but we stayed busy. We've got tons of pictures that we've scanned, did a lot of, kind of background work. And then we've just finally been shooting interviews over the last few years. And so just super excited. And with Corey's project, it's been a lot of great stuff that's in the works. I'm so excited about. Can't wait. I mean, I'm as excited as any fan out there, or even more so. I can guarantee you.
It's one of the person you're going to interview and start with the letter O and end with R. No, not me. Some real Ernest folks.
Actually, I do have a question for Omar. I've been actually thinking this for like 10 minutes. I haven't had the chance. Hey, Omar, I know you're better at interviewing than me or Justin, but I love hearing Ernest stories. What was your experience of seeing Ernest Goes to Camp like? Like, I want to hear, because you said you loved it, so I want to hear more about that.
So I came to this country in 1987. We lived in Miami for a while, and then we moved up here to Kentucky. And one of the things that my parents worked second shift, so I was home a lot with my brother, and then they had to work like Saturday mornings. So one of the things that they would do like on Thursday and Friday night was rent VHSs from like the local video store, which were everywhere at the time in 1987, right? And one of the videos that I remember them renting was Ernest Goes to Camp. And I fell in love with it, man. It was so good.
That's
like,
great.
because at that time too, I was learning English through comic books. Like, I have a lot to thank for like comics for. And Ernest Goes to Camp, I don't know. I just fell in love with the characters, you know, because he was there with a bunch of kids.
You're right. Yeah.
And I think the first time I watched it, I don't think I understood English 100%, right? Like, a lot of the jokes flew by over my head, but a lot of the comedy can just it's universal because it's body. Yeah, it's like physical humor, right?
Right.
It's his like his goofy faces that he would make. Like, I didn't know what he was doing. Was it a bad? It was the badger, right? You never want to do this to a badger.
Yeah.
Like that joke. I didn't know what a badger was, and I'm like, oh, it must be a critter of some kind.
You don't want to mess with, right?
Yeah.
The face goes into the lunch tray, you know, and
so a lot of that humor translated universally. So that was my experience with my brother, and I fell in love with that movie. And yeah, we would rent it. And then we got really excited when it was announced that we're going to do the Saves Christmas and then Goes to Jail. It Goes to Jail, man, was so ridiculous. Like, because he became lightning. There was a lightning dude. I was like, it was ridiculous, but I loved it at the same time because I was a comic book guy. I'm like, he's got lightning powers now. It's like comic books meets Ernest.
Corey's brought that up, the exact thing, right?
Omar
he was Electro Man.
Yes, Electro Man. Ernest VHS, they had Ernest Goes to Camp, Saves Christmas, and Ernest Scares.
Yeah, those movies are such strong rentals, right?
Yeah, they were big. And, you know, eventually we moved on to DVDs and Blu-rays and 4Ks. Although I don't think they've released it in 4K yet, which is a sin because every movie should be released in that format.
Yeah.
I think it's still streaming out there. I think at least one of the streaming services has those movies. The facial expressions were hilarious. Jim could tell the whole story without saying a word. Exactly. And I felt that, man. So that's why those movies that summer, or I'm sorry, those movie rentals of 1987, I think will always stay with me because for me, it was the year that I came to this country. I didn't have a lot of friends because of that language barrier. And I would watch movies over and over. I would read comics, and it was just so those movies that I watched and the comics that I read in that particular year hold a special place in my heart. And that's my story with the Ernest Goes to Camp.
That's awesome.
Nice. Yeah, I mean,
by the way, I jog to that ending theme. Like, that ending theme to this day kicks, man.
Great parts.
Yeah.
It's like Gary Chapman. Yeah.
So 80s, man. I love that. Like, I was trying to find like the a full version of it instead of just the movie version on YouTube. Can't find it.
I think
I'll send you one.
My man. All right.
I think we got it. I know I do.
Yeah, I like to go jogging to that too. I was gonna say,
dude,
that's great.
Yeah, it's such a good track, dude.
You brought up his facial expressions, and I like to always bring this up in the interviews because I love this so much. This topic, these films. A lot of people think that like Ernest is this just bumbling hillbilly, like fly by night. It's just, but Jim Varney's performances are incredible, and it's not just it's like facial expressions is one that most people couldn't pull off, right? But it's also body physicality too. Like he would put his elbows up before he would run, lift his knees. And if me and Justin were talking about this, but if you take any dramatic actor and ask them to perform Ernest, it wouldn't work. And if you put on a khaki hat and a denim vest and you try to act like Ernest, trust me, I've tried, it looks bad. Like it doesn't look the same. You have to train yourself to get to that Ernest level. And so I think Jim Varney's performances were incredible and vastly underlooked or overlooked. You know what I'm trying to say.
Underrated.
Because of how good of a job he did.
Yeah.
Oh, and he had such range. I mean, I know we're mainly focusing on Ernest, but Jim had such range. Like that damn song in Ernest Goes to Camp.
He gets it. Jim glad to train him.
That song,
yeah,
as a grown ass man, brings me to tears. Like
For
the
real.
words, and you feel it.
Yeah.
And the older
real.
you get, you feel it, man. Like every time I listen to that in the car with my girls, and they're like,
Why are you
"Why
crying,
are you,
Dad?
why are you listening to this again?" And I was like, "You'll understand when you get older." Damn it! Like, oh, it's so good, man. I love that song. But like,
Dude, I'm glad
the man
I'm
had
glad you
range.
brought that up because at one of the Ernest days, I thought the same thing too. I mean, this movie makes me this song makes me freaking emotional. Maybe it's just me. I went to one of the Ernest days, and one of the actors, I won't say his name, he got up in front of the crowd. He started talking about that song, and he got choked up because that song touches him so much. And then I started realizing, like, oh, this is iconic. Like everyone who brings up that song has that same. It's like phenomenal. Jim Varney's performance on that is just crazy, crazy good.
It's heartbreaking. It is absolutely heartbreaking. Like you feel, like I said, I didn't really know every single word in the, in English, and I understood the heartache that he was feeling that first time I watched it. It's beautiful. So that, and again, that's why that movie has a very special place in my heart. That song is so popular that if you look on YouTube for it, you'll find covers.
Yeah,
lots of covers for it. That's how much it means to people.
Yeah.
And that says something about the movie and the character. So I'm happy that this is actually coming out, that and it's in my favorite format, graphic novels. It's great, right? That the idea, you said you were a screenwriter at heart, and you're a better screenwriter than a graphic novelist, but did the idea ever come up of like, hey, why don't we just recast Ernest and make it a movie? Had that ever crossed your mind or Josh's mind, and then how would that feel for you as like family? Like,
I would be fine with it.
Okay.
I'll let Corey. Yeah, I would be fine.
If Justin tells me no, I will never speak of this ever again. No, I mean, it's not my decision, but I mean, it's not. I mean, we bandied the idea around, but no serious talk. I mean, there is this thing that Justin will definitely agree with this, that there's a real protectiveness over Jim Varney's performance as Ernest, and so it's a pretty precious thing. If that were to ever be approached, I think it would have to be handled with extreme care to make it be, and somebody would have to be very, very talented to pull it off. I don't think you can just grab any big name. I think that would flop terribly. So I think if that were ever approached, you'd have to have someone specifically right. Otherwise, it would be wrong, if that makes sense. But it's not. We haven't really talked about. That's just my personal ideas.
Okay.
And I think it would depend too. Would it be a replacement of Ernest, or would it be like a nephew, a son? Too. They might be a little more accepting if it was like somebody related, and that you're not trying to exactly replace Jim Varney, right? It would be that might make some difference. But
okay, I think of like me being a comic book guy, but Christopher Reeve's Superman, we lost him on an unfortunate accident. When Brandon Routh was cast as Superman for Superman Returns, he didn't play Superman. He played Christopher Reeves, like Clark Kent and Superman. Like this was like the third movie in the Superman franchise that was started by
Richard Donner.
Richard Donner, thank you. Yeah. But it was Bryan Singer that directed this one, right? So I was thinking something like that. Like we want to do another Ernest movie, so it wouldn't be like a nephew or cousin or
son, right?
It would be the character Ernest again. That's what I mean. And I think what Corey said is right. I think you would have to cast somebody, and it can't just be anybody. No, right. And how often do you see this, John Cena?
A lot, every day, multiple times a day.
Yeah, people are always talking about that. Yeah,
I think
like you have to have. Yeah, I think you have to have somebody that like. There's a certain type of actor where they really pop. And there's not many people on earth that pop like that. Jim Carrey popped like that. So I think you'd have to have somebody who on screen, they're so visual, they're so big, they're so physical and funny all together that there's something special that pops. So you'd have to find the next one of those, I guess.
A question for Justin. Justin, as a kid, how different was Uncle Jim to Ernest? And were there any parts of Ernest that were actually him?
That's a great question. He was, I would say that definitely Ernest was inside him. He was curious like Ernest was, like and he wanted to show you things. He wanted to be your friend. He was authentic like Ernest was. But he was so many more things. Like when he would come over to our house, it would be him doing imitations of Johnny Cash and all these other types of people. And he would be showing us, he loved collecting knives and jewelry. He's pulling out stuff out of his jacket pocket and showing you his latest knife or watch purchase that he would make in some secondhand store. So he's always wanting to teach you something, show you something. And that was kind of like Ernest wanting to show Vern something, hey, Vern, look what I got. So there was definitely, he was pulling from things inside of him for sure. But he was so much different. I love Superman, Clark Kent, and Christopher Reeve. I compare that scene in Superman where he almost reveals himself in Lois's apartment, right?
Yeah.
He stands up straight. He's got that perfect posture. That was Jim, and that was like that subtle change from Jim Varney to Ernest, where he's more hunched over, he's goofier, he puts on the hat like Christopher Reeve puts on the glasses, Superman, to be Clark Kent. And that was very similar, I think, from Jim Varney going to Ernest, and how he could change, because Jim was just very cool, suave, perfect posture, like I said, and much different in some of those ways.
So I never had the chance to meet him.
Yeah.
I saw him at an event. I think it was in Louisville. It must have been the fairgrounds or something.
Mm-hmm.
But he was wearing this outfit that I was like, man, not a lot of people could pull that off. It was like a bedazzled like suit.
Yeah,
it was so cool, and I was like, I don't think I could pull that off. That's
Yeah.
So when you said that he was very straight, yeah, that's the way he was. He looked,
and
he didn't look like the character that looks like somebody you go and pick on, like not fragile or anything like that. So that is an interesting, to comparing him to Superman and Clark Kent. Pretty interesting.
Well, and also the fact that people saw him as a hero. I remember before I wrote my book, I'm seeing videos on YouTube and people making comments like he was a hero. And I'm like, God, I never thought about him as a hero like you would a Superman or something like that. But I'm thinking, I get that though now, right? And when I saw that, I made that connection when writing my book. I'm like, these people see Ernest like I see Superman. And man, that once I kind of locked in on that gave me like so much enthusiasm and drive to really make that book the best I could, especially for the Ernest fans.
You really come across, your uncle has been gone now for 24 years.
Mm-hmm.
And you come across as somebody that loved your uncle. Like every time we talk, even when you and I started talking, like you didn't like, oh yeah, he was my uncle, pretty cool guy. You would tell me stories. Like it wasn't just like he was a pretty cool guy. It was like, no, yeah, Jim was my uncle. And then you would go on to stories. And I think that's really, it says a lot about the man and about the family. Yeah, that's really cool, man.
And I think just an appreciation of writing the book about him, just an appreciation for what he went through, to become the actor he was and becoming Ernest, and what it took to achieve that and maintain that. I mean, it was quite something.
And you guys out there, I mean, hey, go to Amazon and search The Importance of Being Ernest, The Life of Jim Varney. It's a great book. And Justin's recording the audiobook. So if you're like me and you hate reading, then you can get the audiobook and listen.
Graphic novel.
Yeah. I'm like Ernest, like, you have any more pictures? But check out Justin's book. It's really good.
Thank you.
I was just talking to a guy in my local comic book store wearing an Ernest shirt about the Kickstarter today.
Whoa.
So yeah, word has spread.
Awesome.
I mean, the Kickstarter is doing really well. Of course, it can always do better. But I'm going to share a link. And I do have a link in the description of the video. Me and my brother still say no what I mean, Vern.
Yeah.
Each other daily. My brothers and I did that too. When Justin mentioned his curiosity, I think that's what connected me as a kid beyond just the comedy. His heart was wacky, but he was innocent and caring.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's a good way to describe Jim?
Yeah. In Ernest, there was a lot of flavors of Ernest, because, when he started in the commercials, he was, the audience was more widespread and he could be more obnoxious and so forth to Vern. But the movies, you could tell, were really more geared, especially being Disney movies too. They were more geared to kids and young kids. And so he had much more of those kind of qualities to appeal to a younger audience. And it seemed like he could just look at you right through the screen, right, and pull you in. John Cherry, the director, would say, you know, he could pull you in, kind of like Laurel and Hardy, perhaps. Charlie Chaplin, you know, is a huge influence on Jim, and without saying a word, just could kind of make you feel that empathy. There was a commercial in particular early on where he gets excluded from a New Year's Eve party of Vern's house. And Vern basically slams the door in his face. And, you know, then everybody's writing in like, how could you do that to something to Vern? Well, they didn't know that a second part to that commercial had been filmed, and where he rings the doorbell and throws a snowball right in Vern's face. Happy New Year, Vernon. And but that, for the reaction from that first commercial, they realized that they had that Ernest had that empathy, that perhaps we could write a movie that could, you know, last beyond, you know, a 30-second commercial. That fans do have that caring from him, that elicited that kind of response.
Yeah, if you're out there from like England and somebody said earlier they didn't get to see the commercials, like, go check them out. I mean,
YouTube.
Ernest wouldn't have gotten to the movies if it weren't for the commercials. And like I was saying earlier, they were a phenomenon. And actually, they were at the Indy 500, and the CEO of Disney was there, and there was a little parade. Yeah, and Mickey Mouse came by, and they're like, yeah, Mickey Mouse. And then Ernest came by, and they're like, Ernest. Yeah. And so the CEO of Disney was like, we got to sign this. So it's unprecedented that a character from a commercial got signed to 4 movies at Disney off the string. I mean, think about that. No, that's something that no one else has ever done. It's a pretty incredible story, honestly.
I had no idea that's how it happened.
Yeah. Because he had been big for, you know, he started out in like really 81. And by the time 85 rolls around, Dan Rather's covering him on the evening news, Tom Brokaw, Good Morning America. And he's getting this national attention because at that time, he had blanketed the country market by market and eventually got to New York. And so that's when, you know, and so this is still 2 years before Ernest goes to camp. And then he is making an appearance for a client in Indianapolis. And he's at the Indianapolis 500. And at that time, the heads of Disney are Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg. So they're in the crowd and they see the response, and they're like, we ought to do something about this. And there you go. There's the first 4 Ernest movies. So
damn, that's nuts to think about. Because we don't, to think about even a commercial, right? Like, I don't, do we even have commercials anymore? Like, everything is streaming.
Yeah.
I mean, I know they do, but most commercials just have like,
we have Flo from Progressive. I mean,
I was going to say,
Flo.
But she wasn't like a local celebrity, was she?
No.
I don't know. Maybe you should write a book on Flo.
Maybe that's next. Yeah.
Well, that was part of their. That was part of their genius, though, is John Cherry was really smart about this, because they could have done things nationally earlier, but John Cherry said no. So they didn't have national commercials for a long time because they could. You can't do this today, as Justin will tell you, because there are all these local television stations, right? So you could have a commercial there, and everybody's like, "Oh, Ernest is from our town. That's great." And then you're flooding America, but everyone thinks he's from their town, and they were like, "No, we're going to keep it this way." So you couldn't couldn't do that today, because now you have the internet and you can't just have one little market.
Yeah.
You
could upload that right away and it's national. But I mean, they filmed thousands of commercials. I mean, it was over a huge,
because he was across the country.
Yeah.
Well,
and so you could argue that he was as big a commercial phenomenon as he was a movie star or TV star. And that's what I try to capture in my book as well. Like, he was a commercial phenomenon. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. They're like, oh, well, he got to start in commercials, or he did this or that. And like, no, he did thousands of commercials that ran for many, many years. And it's in historical context. I don't know where you place that. I'm not an advertising historian, but it's up there. And I'd like to talk to advertising historians and get their view on where that kind of ranks is, but it was something. Yeah, it really was.
Corey, give me the pitch of this book. When does it take place? What's the story about? Who are the characters? Like, how many pages is this particular graphic novel?
Yeah, so it's over 150 pages. Probably it'll be pushing 160, honestly. I marketed it as 150 plus, but with the Kickstarter stretch goals, we're going to add in some splash pages. We're going to add in some cool stuff. So the pitch basically to the story is, and I'm glad you brought up Ernest Scared Goes to Camp earlier. I'm gonna add this into the pitch, by the way. The pitch is generally that it's my love letter to Ernest Scared Stupid and Ernest Goes to Camp, right? So it's a spooky story, perfect for Halloween. However, there's some pathos in it, and I pulled that because I identified that exact scene from Ernest Goes to Camp, that it's iconic, that makes people like, wow, you don't want to see a character go through something dramatic like that. And so I wanted to take that and stretch that out. So the elevator pitch is there's a town that goes through a tragedy, and this tragedy means a lot to Ernest, and so all the town's gonna basically collapse because of this tragedy. And Ernest bumbles his way into a magical stone that brings his dreams into reality, but it also brings his nightmares into reality. So he accidentally releases this maniacal mad scientist that was played by Jim Varney in a movie a few years earlier called Dr. Otto, and he's got a third hand that grows out of his top of his head, and it pulls his eyebrows while he talks like this. And so now chaos ensues because now the town that Ernest want to save is now more in danger. So we'll put it that way.
More fans of Ernest Goes to Camp, a classic. Hey, William, how are you? I was surprised to see that there are DVD compilations of the commercials. They made DVD compilations of the commercials?
Believes, yeah.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that would have been John and I guess Josh, right? That owned the rights to the character, so they could have.
Well, they were on video cassette even. There was some Ernest, what was it? Remember, Corey, what was the one called? Like the Ernest.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I don't know what it's called.
And there's like an Ernest Film Festival in the mid 80s, and that was like a strong rental too. Yeah, they had made 60 minutes of just commercials.
Now, you do have different formats of the book that are available. You have the PDF format and you have the standard hardcover. There's also like a slipcase edition. Where did all these ideas come from? Like for the different formats, out of curiosity.
From the deep, dark, cells of my cobwebbed brain.
Okay.
So, like there's a standard edition. So there, you can get a PDF, right? If you go to the Kickstarter, you can get a PDF if you want to, but then we're going to have a hardcover collector's edition. So it's got fully colored. It's really nice. And I thought, you know what, our target audience, I suppose, is probably people in their 40s, and they're going to want a collector's edition more likely, right? So we have a collector's edition. Then we thought, hey, let's have a director's cut. Dr. Otto, that's what I'm talking about. I'll tell you, we can tell you more about Dr. Otto in a second. We have a director's cut, and the director's cut to me is the premier thing. If you're a movie nerd, if you love Ernest, the director's cut not only has the full story, but it's like a typical director's cut with comics, but we're going to have even more stuff in it. So not only are you going to get the excerpts from the script and some character illustrations at the beginning, you're going to get excerpts from the original screenplay. You're going to get a little, now this nobody cares about, but you're going to get a little letter to the fans from me explaining things. But then you're going to get some really cool stuff like John Cherry, who was remember we talked about him earlier. He was the original creator of the character. He was also a really talented artist. This guy was really smart. And he would draw these storyboards of the movies. So we're going to have some of his storyboards from Ernest Scared Stupid that he drew in the director's cut, which is going to be cool. We found some archival newspaper clippings. Justin helped me find some of these where people would draw Ernest in the papers in the 80s when he's on his advertising run. We're going to throw some of those in there. We have a rare photo shoot from Jim Varney as Ernest that was taken. We're going to throw those in there. So this is going to be like, if you love stuff like that, it's going to be a really, like, I'm excited to have that on my shelf. But if you just want the story, you can get the standard edition as well.
Will this be available through direct market retailers, like comic book stores, or is it just the Kickstarter?
Right now, we're just talking Kickstarter. I mean, would I like to do more with it? Yes, but we have not thought that far because I was having tunnel vision on this Kickstarter. So we'll see what happens. So yeah,
I will say, it has done really well for Kickstarter, like of this caliber, and you're about to meet one of the biggest goals, which is I think the 100K goal, to try to get beautiful shiny foil stamps added to the cover. Woo! So that's really cool, man. Like seriously, you got
awesome. Yeah.
You guys have done one hell of a job putting this graphic novel together. having Justin involved, and I mean, that's to me is a huge deal because,
of course,
I know he didn't help make the book or anything, but it's
I try to take as much credit as I can.
You should. That seal of approval from the family, right, goes a long way, especially when when it's somebody as beloved as Jim was.
Yeah.
I think it goes a really long way. 7 days left on the Kickstarter. Now, with this success, this is a really good question. Now that you've already surpassed the Kickstarter target, will there be any more Ernest graphic novels in the future?
Well, that's a good question. I hope so. We have ideas. We have ideas that are new. We have some ideas from the past. My cat's gonna jump in here. Hey, buddy.
Fine. What's your cat's name?
Saki, like the drink.
Like
she likes on camera.
Okay.
I don't know. It's not my decision. So she's not moving the camera. Saki, come on. Sorry guys. So yeah, we have ideas, and now that it's successful, yeah, I mean, the big thing was first is, can we do this? Do people care? Can we make it happen? We made it happen, and so we're definitely talking about stuff. Where that'll go, I'm not exactly sure yet. So we'll find out. All right, I'm gonna have to put Saki down. Hold on a second. She's about to knock over my computer.
Auto is badly edited on the digital copy. The whole start with Ernest is cut out. Really?
Is it okay?
Don't forget, Ernest Goes to Splash Mountain prime time special.
Right.
I always forget about the ones that were indie. Like, so there were 4 of the main movies that went to the theater.
Yeah.
Right. And those were all Disney.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, there were 4 more, or were there 5?
5 more, I think. Ernest Goes to School.
Mount Rushmore, was that one of them?
No. I'm trying to think.
You would
know. Splash Mountain.
Yeah.
Kind of like that.
Ernest goes to Africa. Ernest in the Army, goes to school. What's the basketball one? Ernest Slam Dunk.
Slam Dunk Ernest.
I forgot about that.
Slam Dunk Ernest. Yeah, that one had to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar little appearance.
What was the last one?
I think there was Ernest.
Ernest in the Army.
And the Army was the very last one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Ernest Rides Again would have been the 5th. Would have been like the 5th of the last 5. Yeah.
And the one in the theater was Ernest Goes to Jail. Was that the last one?
The last one was
stupid.
Oh, the Disney, but then there was that 5th one that was a theatrical release that was not a Disney. What was that? That was Ernest
Rides Again.
Rides Again.
Yeah.
I forgot about that one.
Yeah.
They didn't
canon.
They didn't market that one that well because it wasn't
they
Disney.
Didn't have the Disney money to do it, right? Yeah.
And Ernest Rides Again, he rides a Revolutionary War cannon for over 30 minutes.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
He gets on a cannon, a Revolutionary War cannon, and it's rolling through town, and he rides it for like over 30 minutes
of the movie.
Time. Yeah. It's wild.
What would be the best way to follow for future Ernest comic book news?
Thank you for asking me that, because this is a point I wanted to say, and then Saki interrupted me, and I would have never forgot about it if it weren't for Griffin Nix. So thank you, Griffin Nix. So guys, whether you see this YouTube video within the 7 days or afterwards, all you have to do to remember the link, it's very simple, is just go to ernestgoestocomics.com. And regardless of what we're doing, of what stage this is, you can go to ernestgoestocomics.com and you can see what we're doing. So right now it forwards you all to the Kickstarter. So if you want to follow that, go there. And if you want to follow us on social media, we have an Ernest Goes to Comics Facebook page. And then we also have the Ernest P. Worrell official page. And we're Ernest Goes to Comics on Instagram. And if you want to torture yourself and see our Twitter page, which I don't recommend, you can go to Comic Book Ernest, because someone already took Ernest Goes to Comics on Twitter. Like, come on, man. Our Twitter page sucks. So don't go there. Just go to the other one.
Don't look at me. No, sir.
Thank you, James, for sharing the information. James has the links here.
Cool.
Thank you, buddy.
Thanks.
He's the man.
I got to ask this question. So I know the answer from Corey. What's your favorite Ernest movie, Justin? We've never talked about this.
It's a hard one. Probably Christmas.
Saves Christmas.
Yeah, but they're all, those first 4, they're all
solid.
right up there. They're all like neck and neck. But I love Christmas. I love Christmas music movies. So yeah, I'd say that one. Maybe that one.
He saved Christmas, man. That's a huge deal, right?
And he goes to Burns' house. You know, he drinks out of his punch bowl. Yeah. It's
So
great stuff.
whenever he was saying Vern, okay, I know we're not talking just the comic book right now. Whenever he was saying Vern, did you ever ask him, like, was he talking to John?
It was really the cameraman was essentially
Whoever the
Yeah,
cameraman
yeah,
was.
yeah.
Okay. I was always curious when I was a kid. I'm like,
because at the beginning, the budget didn't have a budget for a Vern character, but it worked.
Right.
But it worked, and that's what they're very good at adapting to what worked, and in just the small budget, the look of it, and all that. Once they had the money to make better commercials, they still made the same kinds of commercials because they were just so successful.
I don't remember this one. The Ernest Family Album TV special?
That's my favorite. That came out in like 84, I think it was. And it's just a series.
So it was before the movies.
Yeah. It was right before Dr. Otto. And it was just a series of sketches, 6 sketches, and these were characters related to Ernest. They were really, a lot of them are old Jim Varney characters using a stand-up routine, but they got transformed into Ernest characters like Lloyd Worrell, the meanest man in the world.
Yes, it's my favorite.
That's probably one of my favorites. And there's Ace Worrell, and this Billy Boogie Worrell that works as at a carnival ride. Crazy character. You can find it on YouTube, and it's also on streaming on Amazon, I believe, too.
Oh, okay.
But it's got some great characters. It's my favorite of everything.
Go check out. If you're watching this, go check out Hey Vern's My Family Album. There's a character that Jim Varney does called Mean Old Uncle Lloyd, as he said, Lloyd Worrell, and he's hilarious. And he names his own son Mistake. That's all I got to say. Hey, Mistake!
Mistake. Played by a full-grown man. He's supposed to be an 8-year-old.
Oh.
And it's a family that they're so poor they pretend to eat. It's so great. It's so awesome.
Come on in here, Mistake.
That's when I first, I was only 12 at the time when I saw that. And that's when I thought, okay, my uncle, like, yeah, he's really talented. I get it now. Like, I'd seen Ernest, but like,
did your friends know?
Yeah.
Growing up?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Were any of them like huge Ernest fans? Like got a tattoo of Ernest? Like they were like, dude, you got to invite me over.
No, they were. It was funny when I was a kid. I was always like good about like keeping my friends away from him because because it's like funny. It's like I could almost empathize, even though he's an adult. I feel like I could empathize with him. Like I'm sure when he comes home to us, he doesn't want to be surrounded by a bunch of kids. And even at a young age, I empathize with that. Some of my friends got to see him over the years, but when he came home for Christmas, it was just family and all that. And so, and of course, it's Christmas time either. They're with their own families and stuff anyway. But yeah, he every Christmas Eve was just awesome because we always saw him. As I like to say, Santa had a lot to live up to the next day following Jim Varney on Christmas Eve for sure. So
also Santa got to be Santa because Jim Varney's Ernest saved Christmas. So yeah,
right.
It saved Christmas.
Good point. Good point.
Corey, did you ever get a chance to meet Jim Varney, Ernest?
Oh no, I wish I would have. I mean, that would have been incredible, but no, never got to. I mean, for me, meeting Justin is I'm that annoying dude that's like, Justin, wow, and so yeah.
That's awesome. Justin's a good guy.
Thank you.
Yeah, he's all right. Yeah, he's all right.
Dramatically trained actors always make the best comedic roles. I think there's a lot of truth behind that, because he was really good at pulling off different emotions. And I thought, it's gonna be great to look at it on paper. Have you read the book, the comic?
I've made it halfway through the PDF of the screenplay. The comic, I told him at the beginning, I'm not a comic book guy, but when I saw those first,
Justin,
I know
what?
when I saw those pages though, and I saw the way they were able to illustrate the action, and I thought, man, this is great. The way they can really show Ernest and how he moves, and he's battling. What is it? The beginning, a copying machine there.
Yeah. Well, because if you don't know Ernest, he has a problem where at the beginning of a lot of his movies, like appliances come to life and attack him. So
you're right. Yes.
Yeah. And you can feel that on the page, like this. And I thought, man, this is great. This is really going to work, I think.
Now, is the whole comic is written and done?
No. So the Kickstarter is to get the comic made. So it's going to take us a year to get this whole thing made and get to people's doorsteps. That the script is completely done. We got like the first 5 pages of concept art, so you can see what it'll look like. So once the Kickstarter ends, again, if you're checking this out and you're watching this before October 17th, if you want to support us, we'd love your support. If not, you can still go to ernestgoesthecomic.com and you'll take you somewhere where you can get involved. But once that money goes into our business account, production is going to ramp up, and we're, all the work from me is done. It's now on these illustrators, and they're going to be working hard. So I'm really excited because I get to read the comic as it gets made, because even if I wrote this, I'm still so excited to bring Ernest back that I'm so excited to watch this, to read this. So it's going to just be a fun process.
Okay. And let's see. What about the retailers that we talked about? You mentioned that right now you're focusing on the actual Kickstarter, but there is a retailer bundle if retailers are watching later and they're like, oh, that'd be cool to carry in my shop. Is there a limited amount of copies that they have to order? Is that what the retailer bundle is? Yeah,
it's a 9+1. So you'll get the 9 standard editions that I mentioned earlier, plus 1 director's cut. And again, these are all hardcover. They're going to be, the director's cut is probably going to be, I don't know, pushing 200 pages. The standard edition is going to be around 160, 170 if you count all the covers. And so for all of those, you can get a bundle. And then we had a problem on the Kickstarter because a couple stores wanted to order 2 bundles, right? They wanted 20 or 30 books. And so I think I clicked the button wrong and it's too late to change it. So if you want to do that, you can just get a couple accounts, so long as you can prove that you got a brick and mortar store, because we don't want some dude, just being like, oh yeah, and then selling them on eBay or whatever. But as long as you can prove you have a store, yeah, you can get multiple accounts and we'll work with you.
Okay. I did not like that Dr. Otto film at all. The UK DVD was poor transfer, in my opinion, but it was the last Ernest film to get a DVD release. I'm about to binge watch all my Ernest movies.
Cool.
Justin, can you talk a little bit about this? Just Googled Ernest movies and saw that he was often parodied, and a number of which were by The Simpsons, Beavis and Butthead, and Family Guy. How did Jim feel about that? And I'm going to step right over here to take this phone call really quick. But you go ahead and tell how you feel, or the family, I guess, or him.
I think, I know as far as The Simpsons, he was a character in The Simpsons. If you help me with this, Corey, because I'm trying to remember. He
was some kind of carny, like he was a carnival worker and he was like taking advantage of people or something. Yeah.
And then
Ernest goes somewhere cheap, right? You told me that.
Yeah, and then in a later episode, right, they go to a movie, and the movie's called Ernest Goes Somewhere Cheap. So you could, obviously he played a character in the show, and then they parodied Ernest later. So they were huge fans of Jim's and Ernest. What were the other ones?
Family Guy and Beavis and Butthead.
And Beavis and Butthead.
Beavis and Butthead.
I don't remember the Beavis and Butthead one.
I don't know.
I vaguely remember. I'm trying to remember that they're at I think it's a drive-in where the movie, one of the Ernest movies, playing. In the Family Guy, it came out after he passed. Yeah, that was one I'm not sure how I really felt about, because that was like they went out and they shot him, right? And I was like, that's kind of hardcore. The character goes out and then he shoots Ernest, and I thought that's a little hardcore, but
I do remember that episode with The Simpsons. It was Jim Varney and his son end up taking over The Simpsons house.
Yeah, right.
That was
the carny guy. Yeah.
But he was a fan of that show, right? I assume.
Yeah, I mean, he played the character. I mean, I believe so. I mean, he did a movie, a cartoon called Annabelle's Wish. I think it was maybe a straight to video. And of course, I think when it started with Toy Story doing Slinky Dog, he was getting into a lot of voices.
Yeah.
There was even one called Duckman. There's a Hercules cartoon for Disney he did. He was getting a bunch of voice work with cartoons. So
he did. I mean, it makes sense, right, with that type of voice.
Yeah.
Who again, Corey? Who was the artist that you found for the interior of the book?
Yeah, his name's M. Arif Rusanto from Indonesia, and I could not be happier to work with this guy. I mean, this guy's been great to work with. So I couldn't imagine working with anybody else. Fantastic guy to work with for sure. And And also the passion behind the pages, you know, it's not something he's just slapping together. He's really working on trying to make these pages feel like Ernest, and we're really proud of him.
Awesome.
This is your first graphic novel you've written, Corey? Is that right?
Second,
Well,
first
okay.
got signed, but never went anywhere. But yeah, but first one that's going to be like in the public eyes. Yes.
Okay, got you. I just wanted to make sure I had that right. And when, if everything goes smooth, according to plan, knock on wood, when is the release of the book? When can people start seeing it shipped out?
It's a great question.
As long as there's no delays in ports, there's no strikes going on.
Right.
Like
biblical plagues.
Well, I mean, this happens to big
locusts,
companies, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a real thing that happens in book distribution. The printer has problems, the distributor has problems. But if everything goes smooth, when is the earliest, I guess, people can start expecting books to be sent out?
We would, okay, so let me give you what I would love, but let me give you the real too.
Okay.
I don't say this because I don't want to set expectations. What I would really love, what we would really love, is getting people's hands by Halloween next year because it's spooky. And I'm a big Halloween fan. I'm a big stupid fan. I'm a stupid guy. But getting it there in a year, maybe that's ideal. So let's say 12 to 18 months. So maybe by Christmas next year, if not pushing in, 25, if not spring of 26 will be the latest. So about 12 to 18 months is what we're giving ourselves. And you never know. I mean, you know, God forbid anything happen, but you know, you never know.
Okay.
So that's the plan.
Gotcha. When you were writing this, as you're writing the story of in graphic novel format, when the scenes
Screenplay
are being, or in screenplay format rather. So when the scene, so then in your head, you're imagining Jim Varney in these scenarios as you're writing it down on paper.
I'm imagining Ernest, but there's only one person who ever played Ernest, so I'm also
Right.
imagining Jim. I mean, it's hard to separate those two. So yeah, I'm imagining. Yeah. Both, I suppose. That's like the chicken and egg.
Look at me, Dad. You look like James Bond. Varney was Jet in the Beverly Hillbillies. Also, he was on the last year. I don't remember the last year of Roseanne.
Yeah,
he was in that.
A couple episodes. Yeah, he played Prince Carlos of Moldavia. He was dating her sister for a very short time. Jackie, yeah.
I've only seen the last season, I think, once, so It's been a long time.
I did want to say, if I could, back to I'm kind of fascinated by the people that aren't from the United States that are fans of Ernest. We have these people from England, and I wanted to say, when we started testing illustrators, we were messaging illustrators from across the world. One of the interesting things that happened was I messaged an illustrator from the Philippines, and I never knew what, some people would be like, I'm not even going to reply to this. It's Ernest. I'm not going to reply. Some people would be like, I'm not interested. And then some people, like this guy from the Philippines, he's like, what do you want to write? And he asked the character. I sent him a picture of Ernest, and then he just goes, ha, 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 ha. Like there's H-A-H-A-H-A-H-A. He remembered Ernest. And so he said, yeah, when I was a kid, I spent my own money to go watch that in the theater. And this is a guy from the Philippines. And that's just like, wow. And that's when I really was like, oh, wow, this is like not just, and I went to a Nashville Comic-Con this last year, and I bumped in, I talked to the guy who voiced Magneto in the X-Men 97, right? And he told me a story where he was a kid and he went with his dad to the video store, Blockbuster, whatever, and he got in a big argument with his dad about renting Ernest Goes to Camp. And his dad was like, we are not bringing that home in our house. And he was like, we got to bring this home, Dad. And so it's kind of interesting when I hear these people having these experiences, even outside of the US. It's just fascinating.
I think that's interesting. So I was about to ask, did your artist know Ernest? Or did you just show him stills like, this is a guy, he's funny, draw the book? Or because,
no, he knew him.
So, okay, that's awesome, because I think you feel that personal connection knowing the actor and the character. So you want, not that he wouldn't put his best work, everybody's a professional, right? But I think it means something more when you actually make that connection. Oh, I grew up watching Ernest. I got to make sure I get his facial expressions right, because this was a human being. Like, this is a person. It's not like drawing like Captain America, right? Or Spider-Man or Superman before the movies. Which are characters. This was an actual person, which I think is really difficult. Uh, thank you, Justin, Omar, and Corey, for the heads up on what sounds like some funny nostalgia. Also, could one of you guys call my wife and take the blame for me insisting we watch Ernest Scared Stupid?
That's pretty funny. Hey, maybe she'll love you even more after that. It's a great movie. Come on.
Or maybe she'll look at you and say, what the hell is wrong with you?
Yeah, one of the two. One of the
Which
two.
is a win-win to me. I'm so excited for this. Jim was such a treasure, and it is amazing that this part of my childhood is being given so much love and consideration. Thank you for doing this. Rest in power, Jim. Crazy. I still think it's crazy that it's been 24 years that he's been gone.
Yeah.
And has left an impact, you know,
for sure,
in a lot of people's lives, whether they knew it or not, whether they may not have seen a single Ernest movie or TV show or commercial, but they know that voice of Slinky Dog from, he was in the first 2 movies, right?
Yep. First.
And it was his friend that took over the role afterwards, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what was his name. We were just watching that video. I'm trying to remember his name.
Oh
Picked
gosh,
over the role.
I can't remember. But he sounds just like him too. We saw Scared Stupid as a school field trip. That's
that's awesome.
Wow.
That's great.
An awesome. I went to see the rest of them in the theater. Like the Ghosted Camp is one I rented over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
But the rest of them, I was like, oh my gosh, he's coming back to the theaters. Then the TV show, man,
I wish my teacher took me to see Scared Stupid when I was in elementary school. That'd be amazing.
Ernest Scared Stupid was my first encounter with the character and with Jim, and that film is such a delight. It gets included in my 31 Days of Horror when I need it. We need to have a heartwarming film on it. Yes.
Awesome.
It should be included.
Yep.
Yeah. It should
Blake
be included.
Clark.
Yeah, Blake Clark. Thank you.
Thank you, James.
And they were in a movie together in the late 80s called Fast Food. They had met actually in the late 70s while they were doing stand-up in California. So they were already friends throughout, you know. And so that's really cool that he ended up taking over that role because he knew Jim. So yeah, that's really awesome. Thank you.
This is true. I forgot about this. Scared Stupid did bring back the killer clowns from outer space.
Yeah.
Guess what they used for those? That's right. They painted over them, right? To use them as the trolls in that movie.
I believe that's what happened. Yeah, it was the Chiodo brothers that did the clowns and Ernest the clown movie, right?
Yeah, Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Yeah.
Which I love that movie.
Yeah.
And I forgot about this.
Yeah. Which is a reason why it was so scary too. I mean, those trolls. Yeah.
Chiodo brothers made some scary looking stuff, man.
Yeah.
The clowns to this day are awesome, man.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Oh yeah. Great movie. Great movie. Yeah, it's cool to see people like, I get more excited when I see these fans like sending these comments like I'm so excited because I love this so much, and when I feel other people getting excited, and one cool thing about this is I've had people questions like, well, why bring back Ernest? And Ernest is a fantastic character that I love. Ernest is kind, he's authentic, he's empathetic, he believes in people that other people wouldn't, he forgives people that other people couldn't. He's got the heart of Rocky Balboa. He's more Clark Kent than Superman because he makes the mistakes and he's kind of like a human. And he's got the kindness of Ted Lasso, right? Like if you think about Ted Lasso is in a world surrounded by cynical forces, but Ernest that's Ernest, right? Like he's this kind guy around these dark forces and he has to win through kindness. He's such a great character. And not only that, but like there's so, I love dark anti-heroes. Like I love Batman. When I was a kid, I liked Gambit when he was like, more of the raging. He was smoking cigarettes. Jim Lee was drawing him, and he was like angry. Yeah. I love all that stuff. But I think that things like Ted Lasso prove that our culture does want some characters who win through kindness and win through caring. I think there's room for that, and so I'm just so thrilled to be able to like help bring Ernest back and see fans' excitement and get to talk to you guys. But I mean, it's just cool, man.
It is really amazing to me that you we talked a little bit and bonded over the song in Ernest Goes to Camp, right? And how emotional we get when we hear it to this day. And it is amazing to me that whenever you thought you were the only one, there's just so many other people that share that story, and you're like, oh, I'm not alone. All these other people thought the same thing. That's wonderful. I love hearing that.
Yeah.
Our schools. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say there's something about seeing such a caring, childlike character feel that depth of pain. It's just moving. Something about it.
Our school saw Care Bears the movie, Ernest, Homeward Bound, Fern Gully, Supergirl, Willy Wonka, and releases field trips over the. You had awesome teachers, dude.
Wow.
Was he the first person to ride Splash Mountain? Ernest was.
I suppose, yeah. They had a whole little commercial about, or like a little show about it, yeah. In
like to try it out.
I think it was Disneyland in California. Yeah, it was a whole little special they did about it, and they brought it. They made it appear like it was some special news program. Like they had this guy in the news studio, then they went to the location and he's trying it out, and yeah,
world's first Splastronaut.
Yeah.
That could have gone bad. I'm glad everything was fine. Well, the book start with a Mr. Bill short story. That is true. You don't have to spoil it. You don't have to say anything. But are there any Easter eggs in here for Ernest fans?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll say this. There are going to be a lot of cameos. There's going to be a lot of like cameos that were Jim Varney characters in the book. And so, yeah. And the intro of the book is going to be similar to a couple of intros of the movies. But I won't say any more than that. But there's something that Ernest movies did at the beginning that I love. And so, yeah.
This is a question for me. How happy are you that Image Comics and Rob Liefeld are coming back to making Youngblood next year and oversized hardcovers of the series? I am very excited, man. I saw his post. I'm always happy when people get the rights back to their own characters. Sure. It was a prime time 30-minute special. Ernest Goes to Splash Mountain.
Okay.
That's the one I was thinking of. I thought it was Mount Rushmore, not Splash Mountain. Okay.
I
never saw this
one too.
I never saw this one.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's funny too, because he's like, I'm going to go to the new NASA Splastronaut training facility. And then he just goes to Vern's house and he's on like a tire swing.
You know, I'm being honest here. Like you guys talking to you two just brought back a lot of memories. And now I'm like, I own Ernest Goes to Camp. I don't own the other movies. I think I need to buy them
for sure.
And I need to watch Scared Stupid. It's been a long time since I've seen Scared Stupid. Like it's
great.
It's been at least 10 years.
Oh wow.
I mean, my kids have never seen Scared Stupid.
Gotcha.
Can I sell Scared Stupid for you real quick?
Sure. Tell it to me.
Man, I think Scared Stupid is like the peak of Jim Varney's like Ernest performance. I think he'd been doing the character so long that when he gets to Scared Stupid, his performance is amazing. He's like a Looney Tune, like in real life. And so his eyes and his expressions are big. The writing is on point. Like it's got a great story arc. It's just, to me, it's like peak Ernest. So yeah, it's also interesting because Camp is like a dramedy almost. And then by the time you get to Scared Stupid, you're like in wacky Looney Tune land.
Yeah, because they didn't want to scare kids too much, right? You still wanted to pull in that audience that he was like, you know, that's your target audience. But the creatures were creepy enough. I do remember that.
Yeah, I think they admitted in one of the articles, newspaper articles, it turned out a little scarier than I think they had intended. You know, you hear a lot of people now talking about how much that movie scared them as kids.
Yeah, I've heard that. I was like, a little older when that came out, but
me too. So, but legitimately, like it scared some kids. For sure.
Scared Stupid brings, dude, Saturday Morning Fan knows a lot about these movies. Scared Stupid brings back the dog from jail, also, and has Catwoman in it.
Yeah.
Rimshot is the dog, and Eartha Kitt played Old Lady Hackmore. And Old Lady Eartha Kitt's performance is incredible.
Who has a Christmas tie-in. You know, she's the Santa baby singer.
Dang. Okay. I have to watch some Ernest movies now. I haven't watched one since I was a kid in the late 90s. Time to relive a part of my youth. Hey, we had Return to Oz as kids, and we were fine. Yes, absolutely. I love that movie, too. All Dogs Go to Heaven is a classic. Okay. So we talked about the Kickstarter. We talked about the art. We talked about the different tiers that are here. Any last words, gentlemen, to anybody that is watching, catching this live, or watching this later?
I hope that you guys like it, and I hope you check out Justin's book too. I'm just happy to be here, man. So, famous last words.
I was glad to do this. This was my pleasure. This was a lot of fun. What about you, Justin? Any last words, man?
Can't think of any. Just that I hope I'm so excited about it. I mean, it's, like I said, it's been over. We talked about it's been over 25 years, and you know, I know when I wrote my book, it was mainly with the Ernest fans in mind. That Ernest character has such a great legacy, meant so much to so many kids, and you know, it's popular back when family viewing was a big thing too. You know,
Yeah.
families would gather around the TV and go to movies and watch together, and so I realized what it meant to people, and yeah, this my book, and then this, you know, which is bringing Ernest back to the public, and that's awesome. I'm so glad to be a part of all of this. So excited.
Importance of being Ernest link right here, and the link to the Kickstarter. Who's the lady? I always wondered, is she based on somebody? Who's the lady in the neck brace character? She's hilarious, but I just can't remember her
I think
name.
my mom has told me like she's kind of loosely based on an aunt of theirs, but you know, he would kind of pull from different people, not anybody specifically really, but you know, but yeah, she's a favorite, you know. And here's a little trivia for you.
Her name is
and he won an Emmy for that Hey Burn It's Ernest, and for playing the different characters on that show, Hey Burn It's Ernest, and one of the characters is Auntie Nelda. Well, so on the Emmy, it's got Jim as playing Ernest, Auntie Nelda, and others. So her name is actually
top billing.
She's actually on the Emmy.
That's
you know,
awesome.
and it's great because you know she doesn't get any respect, but she's on the Emmy. So that's awesome. Yes.
Thank you all so much for watching.
Yes,
Seriously, and go and check out the Kickstarter. They've got 7 days left. It's been really successful so far. And I just want to thank again my guests, Corey Perkins and Justin Lloyd.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Don't forget to smash that like button and check out Ernest. And hopefully there will be more graphic novels, maybe some cartoons some days. And have a great one, everybody.
Bye, guys.